As excited to hear this one as I am. She's an incredibly inspiring speaker and person, an Air Force veteran, a wife, a mother of two, an athlete who has a story regarding her own experience with Parkinson's disease and advocacy. Really, I mean, she I will say that she is a tireless advocate for gaining resources and information about the problem of Parkinson's disease in people post 9/11 veterans, something that we don't talk about very much at all, especially women in post 9/11 veterans. So I very much look forward to hearing your talk, Sarah. Thank you.
Good morning. I am honored to be here to share my story with you. Thank you for the talk. You hit the nail on the head on so many things that it kind of helps cut my talk down a little bit. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2020 at the age of 46. It came as quite a shock to me because I'd always considered myself to be very healthy. I grew up running with my dad. I ran cross country and track in high school and at the Air Force Academy. I went on to run several marathons and triathlons as I got older. And it was quite a shock. After graduation from the Air Force Academy, I served as an aircraft maintenance officer in Texas, went to medical school, did a military internship, and then served 3 years as a flight surgeon in the Air Force, where I went to serve a year in Korea as a flight surgeon for an F-16 squadron, which was by far the most crazy year of my life, living in the dorms with a bunch of fighter pilots. After that, I went on to Travis Air Force Base, where I was a flight surgeon for a C-5 squadron and also worked in hyperbarics, helping to take care and helping with the dives for patients with non-healing diabetic foot ulcers. After that, I did an anesthesia residency at the University of Utah and then went back into the Air Force to serve the rest of my commitment as an anesthesiologist at Nellis Air Force Base. During my time at Nellis, I deployed to Afghanistan for 6 months, which by far was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I'm trying not to get emotional talking about it, but I was due. I left my 6-month-old and 3-year-old daughter behind, and it was by far the hardest thing I had to do. While in Afghanistan, I took care of American service members and also Afghani children and adults who had been injured in the war, which was also very challenging. I lived in a plywood bee hut in Afghanistan, not far from the burn pits, and I also got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and ran most mornings with my friends. The perimeter of the runway, which helped keep us sane, but in hindsight may not have been the best idea with the toxic exposures. And I retired from the Air Force Reserves, and after I got back from Afghanistan, I served a few more months at Nellis and then left active duty in 2011, and then served the rest of my commitment in the Air Force Reserve. I retired from the Air Force Reserves in 2019. In 2020, I was sitting on the couch one evening with my husband, my family, and my husband commented.
This issue that you put on kind of whole health and you know.
It kind of helps cut my talk down a little bit. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2020 at the age of 46. It came as quite a shock to me because I'd always considered myself to be very healthy. I grew up running with my dad. I ran cross country and track in high school and at the Air Force Academy. I went on to run several marathons and triathlons as I got older. And it was quite a shock. After graduation from the Air Force Academy, I served as an aircraft maintenance officer in Texas, went to medical school, did a military internship, and then served 3 years as a flight surgeon in the Air Force, where I went to serve a year in Korea as a flight surgeon for an F-16 squadron, which was by far the most crazy year of my life, living in the dorms with a bunch of fighter pilots. After that, I went on to Travis Air Force Base, where I was a flight surgeon for a C-5 squadron and also worked in hyperbarics, helping to take care and helping with the dives for patients with non-healing diabetic foot ulcers. After that, I did an anesthesia residency at the University of Utah and then went back into the Air Force to serve the rest of my commitment as an anesthesiologist at Nellis Air Force Base. During my time at Nellis, I deployed to Afghanistan for 6 months, which by far was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I'm trying not to get emotional talking about it, but I was due. I left my 6-month-old and 3-year-old daughter behind, and it was by far the hardest thing I had to do. While in Afghanistan, I took care of American service members and also Afghani children and adults who had been injured in the war, which was also very challenging. I lived in a plywood bee hut in Afghanistan, not far from the burn pits. And I also got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and ran most mornings with my friends the perimeter of the runway, which helped keep us sane, but in hindsight may not have been the best idea with the toxic exposures. And I retired from the Air Force Reserves. And after I got back from Afghanistan, I served a few more months at Nellis and then left active duty in 2011. And then served the rest of my commitment in the Air Force Reserve. I retired from the Air Force Reserves in 2019. In 2020, I was sitting on the couch one evening with my husband, my family, and my husband commented that my left arm was shaking. And I kind of looked at it and I said, why would my left arm be shaking? And so I'm sitting there on the couch, I Googled, why do I have a unilateral resting arm tremor? And it was one article after Parkinson's that came up after another. And it's that moment that my world just stopped. And I stopped and I started reading, because in my mind, I remembered seeing this exact same photo pictures of, picturing myself being a hunched over older man and in a wheelchair in 10 years. But I realized I've been having symptoms for years that I just chalked up to getting older. I actually quit running a few years earlier because I'd gotten so slow and stiff. It wasn't fun anymore. I was no longer a competitive runner. In the mornings, I'd be so stiff, I'd have to go down the stairs without alternating feet, one step at a time. My husband was always harassing me about not finishing my sentences and the volume of my voice trailing off and things like that I just didn't really take seriously. I did not have a delay in care. The next day, after noticing my tremor, I was at work. I work as an anesthesiologist at a small, one of Cleveland Clinic's smaller regional hospitals. And the hospital president happens to be an anesthesiologist who I was working with the next day. And I said to him, Dr. Napierkowski, I think I have Parkinson's disease. And he looked at me and he laughed and he said, Sarah, there's no way that you have Parkinson's disease. And I said, no, really, I think I have Parkinson's disease. And he said, well, if it would make you feel better, I'll call Judah, our neurologist, and see if he can come meet you in the physician's lounge a little bit later. So about an hour later, Dr. Napierkowski covered my operating rooms and I went and met with Dr. Lindenberg in the physician's lounge in one of the rooms off the lounge. He heard my story, did a brief physical exam. He had ordered some tests for me to do later, but said that he thought that I most likely had Parkinson's disease. A couple months, I've had the best access to medical care all along. And despite this, I still struggle. I had every single symptom that she had up there, as far as the denial, anxiety, all of that. 2 months later, I got in to see a movement disorder specialist, and he started me on medication. I struggled for, about a year and a half. Had anxiety and depression. I never had that before. I wasn't sleeping well. I gained 30 pounds and I still wasn't exercising. At my second movement disorder specialist, Dr. Walter gave me an appointment. Dr. Walter gave me a list of research studies that were ongoing in the area. And one of them was a study being conducted by Dr. Jay Alberts at Cleveland Clinic, studying the effects of high intensity exercise on the progression and management of Parkinson's disease. Having been previously a cyclist, I thought, hey, this is right up my alley. I don't really have time to go be in a research study, but this might be interesting. And so I contacted the study coordinator and was subsequently enrolled in the study. Fortunately, I was in the group that was randomized to receive a Peloton exercise bike for a year, a Fitbit fitness monitor, and got regular phone calls from a physical therapist who was encouraging me to ride the bike more and congratulating me on my progress. About 4 months into the study, 4 months into the study, I was starting to feel a little bit better, but I still wasn't sleeping well. I fell asleep at a red light on my way home from work one afternoon and had the thought that, wow, I probably am not safe to work as an anesthesiologist anymore. If I can't stay awake sitting in a red light, probably not the best idea to be an anesthesiologist. And so I tearfully talked to my leadership, saying that, I just don't think it's right for me to continue to practice. They suggested that I take a month off and talk to my doctors, readjust my medications, and we would readdress the situation in a month. That month was a godsend. I was able to meet my primary care physician, the initial neurologist who had diagnosed me, and also my movement disorder specialist. We had made a couple of medications adjustments. In addition, during that month, I was able to ramp up my exercising, and I began to feel even better. And I also had the time to sit down and think of the trajectory that my life was on and what I could do to change that. And so I sat down and made some goals. My husband at this point had been training for a half Ironman triathlon for about 4 months, and it was still 6 months away. And I secretly made the goal to get to the finish line of that race. Sorry. and I started training. 2 months later, I was feeling my training was going amazingly well. I told my husband I was training for the race. And on the day of the race, I beat all of my expectations and goals. My initial goal had been just to get to the finish line alive. I had modified that to go under 6 hours and eventually modified it to qualifying for the half Ironman World Championships, which were later that year. And I also beat my husband, most importantly. Still won't let him live that down. A month later, a month after the World Championship race, I was watching the TV broadcast of that Ironman World Championships. A full Ironman, for those of you who don't know, is a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, followed by a marathon, all back to back. This is the Ironman Kona, or Ironman Hawaii, is like the Super Bowl of triathlon, and it's incredibly difficult to get a spot. Each year they do a documentary about the race, and in 2022, and they also often feature the story of somebody who's overcome adversity in order to be there. In 2022, they featured the story of Chris Nikic, who's the first person with Down syndrome to finish an Ironman. And after seeing his story and seeing what he was able to accomplish by setting small goals and working a little bit towards them each day, and also seeing the impact that he had on the Down syndrome community and helping them to believe in themselves and be able to set goals and accomplish amazing things, I had the thought that, you know, he's been able to accomplish this. There's no reason that I couldn't, and that my story might also help educate and inspire others about the power of and importance of exercise in the management of Parkinson's disease. And so I wrote Ironman and I told them my story. I didn't hear anything back. This is in January of 2023 that I wrote them. I ended up doing another half Ironman in May. I was sick through most of the summer, July and August. I don't know if I had COVID, but I was not able to exercise very much. And I just started training for a fall marathon when I got a phone call from Ironman offering me a slot to compete at the 2023 Ironman World Championships in Hawaii, which at this point was only 9 weeks away. I'm a little bit insane, and I realized that this is also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I was going to do whatever it took to get there. And so I said yes, and I got to work training. With this, I also realized that I would have a platform on which to share my story. And so I could let my movement disorder specialist and Dr. Alberts know the good news and told them that they were welcome to share my story with others in the community if they thought that it would help inspire and educate others. A few days later, I heard from their communications team. I told her my story, and she asked if she could share it with her friends on the Today Show. I kind of laughed and said, well, not really that interesting, but sure, why not? And it turns out they ended up picking up the story. They came and filmed my story for 2 days in Ohio, and then I went to New York and was on the Today Show, 7-minute piece, which I can get you the link to later if you'd like to see it. When I got to Ironman, it was everything that I hoped it would be. When I got there, I shared my story with the communications team there. And after telling my story, I noticed that one of the photographers was in tears and the producer was looking very emotional. And they asked if I could be their inspiring athlete to focus on the documentary for this year, meaning that there would be cameras on me for the entire day, for most of the day. But I said yes. So there were drones flying next to me for part of the bike, motorcycles in my face, one guy riding along on a Segway with a camera when I was walking later during the race. The day of the race everything was amazing. It was incredibly difficult, but I got through it. The swim went as planned. The bike was going well until I got to about mile 80 on the bike, and I noticed my cadence had started to slow down. I had gotten really hot, and I couldn't get my heart rate down. So I got pulled into the aid station at about mile 80, knowing that I still had about 2 hours left on the bike. The volunteers were kind enough to pack my jersey with ice. They asked if I needed the medical help. I said, I think I'll be okay. I just need to take some of my medication. They helped me undo the vial for my medications because I was so shaky at that point. And I had some time to just let my heart rate get down. They also asked if they could say a prayer with me before getting back on the bike, which we did, and on I went. When I got to the transition, I would look like the hunched over old man from the photos from before. After being on a bike for 7 hours, I was incredibly stiff. Fortunately, I had taken my massage gun with me and was able to loosen things up before heading out on the run, which ended up turning it more into a shuffle and a walk. I often run with music and race with music to help keep my brain alert and active. And at Ironman, you're not allowed to have music. So partway through the run, I was kept getting slower and slower. I wasn't really walking in a straight line anymore. And I realized that I need to figure something out. So as people passed me, I would try to start talking to them. And I eventually met a woman, Tanya, who is an OBGYN doctor from Australia. And we walked, she had a good pace going and an interesting story. And so for the next 12 miles, the last 12 miles, I walked with her and I learned all about the Australian healthcare system and what it's like to deliver a baby in Australia. So a few pictures. This is me training on the bike. These pictures are from the Ironman documentary at the beginning of the swim. And just a photo from Ironman. When we got to mile 25 of the run, I was surprised to see there on the corner Chris Nikic and his dad. And I stopped and I said to Chris, "You're the reason that I'm here. I saw your story last year and it made me believe in myself and have the strength to believe that I could do this here today." And he gave me the biggest hug and took off sprinting down the hill, saying, "Come on, come on." And his dad's yelling at him to come back because obviously I can't sprint at this point. But Chris comes back and grabs my hand and is encouraging me for the next half mile of the race, telling me to keep on going. When I got to the finish line, I'm getting emotional with this. I usually put this at the end. The most incredible moment of my life was crossing the finish line with the American flag. After this, I ended up running. I was not super happy with my marathon time since I had to walk most of it. So I ended up running the St. Jude Marathon in December and was able to run Boston qualifying time. I called Boston because I was already too late for the deadline that year and asked if it would be possible to compete in April. And they said yes. And that this was the first year they were going to have a para-athlete division, a coordination and para division, which was intended for people with Parkinson's disease. And so I sent in all my medical paperwork and I ended up meeting with the U.S. Paralympic Committee classifiers the day before the marathon. They did a 45-minute exam, having me zigzag back and forth, hop up and down, do all sorts of crazy stuff. And I ended up getting a T36 para-athlete classification. Sorry, you got highlights here. The most amazing thing from Boston, though, was meeting other people with Parkinson's disease who are running the Boston Marathon. And these people are a testament to the incredible power of exercise. Rhonda Fell, here on the right, was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1999. She gained 100 pounds the first 10 years, basically said she went home to die. And was in a wheelchair. She ended up getting a DBS. Her son encouraged her to start walking. She ended up walking a 5K, then running a 5K. And now in 2024, she's run over 100 marathons, including Boston Marathon 13 times. So I think she is a testament to what is possible with a positive attitude, gratitude, and exercise. In addition, this man, Joe Drake, has written a book about his journey. He was not a runner before his diagnosis. He'd never run a race in his life. He was diagnosed at the age of 60. 3 years later, he ran all 6 marathon major races around the world over the course of 1 year. And he's doing amazingly well. If you passed him on the street, you wouldn't even know that he had Parkinson's disease. And so I think these people inspire me to keep, when the days get hard and it's hard for me to exercise, I think of Rhonda and this, somehow she does this and she's still going. And I hope to be still able to run 25 years from now as well. So after this, it occurred to me that, yay, it's an Olympic year. The Paralympics are coming up. I wonder if I can qualify for the Paralympic trials. And so I looked into it, and it turns out the only events they have in my classification are the 100-meter dash and the 200-meter dash. I've never used starting blocks. I was a distance runner in high school and college, but I looked at the times and thought that, hey, maybe I can pull that off. And so the last day I was able to turn in a qualifying time. I found a master's track meet in Washington, D.C., went and ran the 100-meter dash and the 200-meter dash for the first time and was able to qualify for the U.S. Paralympic trials. The trials were broadcast on Peacock. It turns out there was only one other woman in my division, 24-year-old Jordan McGuire. She has mild cerebral palsy and has been racing track since high school. She's 24 years old now. So the race started out okay, and then I was actually winning until, this is a 200-meter dash, until about 10 yards before the finish line, and I did a face plant. Had gone to accelerate, and my left leg didn't accelerate as fast as I thought it would be, and I lost my balance and did a face plant. I got up and finished the race, and I joke with my husband that the day was not a complete failure because if my goal was to raise awareness about the challenges of living with Parkinson's disease and having the ability to laugh at ourselves, that it was a complete success because more people have seen the video now that I've fallen that would have not had I not. And this is a picture of Jordan and I afterwards with our medals. She got the first place medals and I got the second place medals. About 18 months after my diagnosis, I learned that one of my Air Force Academy track teammates, Jenna, had also been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. This is Jenna here. she came to cheer me on at Kona. This is Jenna with the American. She brought with her to Kona the American flag that she had that had flown over Afghanistan, and that's the flag that I carried across the finish line. This is a picture of her while she was waiting for me to get to the finisher chute so she could hand me the flag. Jenna is also a physician. She also deployed to Afghanistan. She was there about the same time that I was, but at a different base, and we had been diagnosed at about the same time, within a month of each other. To us, this seemed like more than a coincidence, and so we started looking into it more. And we found 3 other people who had been cadets at the Air Force Academy while we were there, including 1 woman. So if you just look at the women, between 1995 and 2000, less than 900 women graduated from the Air Force Academy total. 3 of us have been diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's disease. So we decided to look into it further, and I was fortunate to connect with Dr. Duda here at the VA about a year ago, and we talked about it. And I was surprised to learn from him that he had not been seeing a large number of younger veterans with Parkinson's disease. And Jenna and I got to thinking about it, and we came up with 3 reasons why this might be the case. Number 1, maybe it's just a fluke that I just happen to know a bunch of people with Parkinson's disease. Number 2, the average age of male patients who use the VA services are in their mid-60s. Many of us younger people with Parkinson's disease or with Parkinson's in general are still in the civilian workforce, or our spouses are in the civilian workforce, and we have access to civilian medical care and don't necessarily need the VA programs now, but will definitely benefit from them as we age. And the third thing that we thought of why you might not be seeing as many veterans is because maybe those veterans are being denied access to your programs. Jenna and I had both served over 20 years in the Air Force. We both deployed to Afghanistan and served on bases of contaminated water supplies. We'd have both applied for VA disability benefits and been denied. We both appealed the decision, and separately, we hadn't even figured each other had the disease yet at this point. Had attached articles about the progression of the disease, and again, were denied access to VA benefits. And so we decided, we were wondering if this was happening to other people. And so through a series of Freedom of Information Act requests, I'm going to read this from up there, I asked how many post 9/11 veterans have applied for VA disability benefits for Parkinson's disease, and how many of those have been approved and denied. And the numbers were more than I had expected. So over 5,400 post 9/11 veterans have applied for VA disability benefits for Parkinson's disease. If you conservatively say that there's about 4 million post 9/11 veterans, this makes it about 8 to 10 times more likely that a young person in the same age group will have Parkinson's. Veteran will be 8 to 10 times more likely to have Parkinson's than a non-veteran. In addition, about half of these people had been denied access to benefits. And so this was pretty shocking to us. And so we looked into it further, not knowing much about the VA policy. We had both worked in the VA systems as medical students, as residents. I had worked as an attending, and I thought I understood how it worked, but I had no appreciation of how difficult in the process of actually applying for VA benefits works. Because that is a totally separate division of what the doctors see. And so in order for a veteran to receive service connection for veterans disease, for Parkinson's disease, that service member must be diagnosed while on active duty or within 1 year after leaving active duty. And as we all know, it takes longer than a year for the disease to progress after exposure to some sort of toxin. Or if you have a history of a traumatic brain injury while on active duty and develop Parkinson's disease, the VA will service connect that. And then the PACT Act of 2022 finally granted presumptive service connection for Parkinson's disease for Vietnam veterans. In addition, a veteran must have served on active duty, not been dishonorably discharged, and then have a medical diagnosis of a disability and a link between that diagnosis or event and their illness. The benefits for somebody to get benefits for somebody who has a VA disability versus not are enormous. First, we have access to the amazing programs that you have and bringing the care teams together. It took me well over a year to establish my care team and even figure out that I needed a care team. And so it's amazing that what you're able to do in bringing all those people together. And so this would give access to this. In addition, with VA benefits, we have access to vocational health rehab programs, so we can continue to do our jobs. Ensure housing security, so many of us won't be able to work until the full age of 65. And so being able to ensure that these veterans don't become homeless. and federal employment preference. So being able to find a job within the federal government that they are able to do if they're not able to do the other job that they've been working on, in addition to a monthly disability payment, which increases as the disease progresses. So for me, the thing that made the biggest difference of all and helped me get out of my depression, anxiety was one, the research study, but I think just as important, it was meeting and interacting with other people with Parkinson's disease. I was very fortunate a few months after my diagnosis to meet Dr. Karen Jaffe. Dr. Jaffe had been diagnosed with Parkinson's 10 years before I had. Her husband happened to be a writer for a comic on Seinfeld, and so they've done a lot of charity work with comedy as well. But Karen started In Motion, which is an amazing community center in Cleveland that brings people with Parkinson's together to exercise. That also changed my life because going and exercising with other people with Parkinson's, it helps reduce social isolation. They do these amazing, every 6 months, there's a evaluation that everybody goes through. It's an hour long, doing various physical activities, cognition tests, seeing how fast you can walk over the course of an hour. And it's fun to compete against myself to see that actually, I'm better at most of those things now than I was 3 years ago by working on it every day. And I think an amazing position that you have in the VA is to maybe take this global, because if you look at all the medications that you talk about and all of the other programs that you do, there's nothing as effective or that's been shown to slow the progression of Parkinson's disease that is effective as exercise. And yet we don't spend money on that. We spend money on expensive drugs that have side effects and don't necessarily work as well. So why not spend that money on developing programs like In Motion that bring veterans together, have exercise programs for them, track their progress, have them competing against themselves and working hard to get better. And I think the way you're funded and the way that is so unique compared to somebody on a commercial health plan, that you have the ability to make this happen. And I think there is incredible value and you have the potential to make a huge difference with that. So my goals, I would love to see research to further study and look into my Freedom of Information Act data about how Parkinson's disease is affecting post 9/11 veterans and why. And just so that we can work to eliminate this in future service members. I also think on some level it becomes a national security issue and something we should bring up with Congress, because as a graduate of the Air Force Academy, I have 2 daughters, and I've been talking up going to the Air Force Academy and taking them to football games and sharing all my friends and all my crazy stories of all the amazing things that I got to do, and hoping that one of them would choose to go to the Air Force Academy. But now that my daughter is a senior in high school and she's filling out applications, I find myself discouraging her from that, because I worry that she's going to have health problems and be exposed to things that may cause her problems later on, and that breaks my heart. I also think it's important that we continue to fight for presumptive service connection for veterans and using the data that we are able to get to figure out who's affected, because many of these people have sacrificed a lot, and they deserve the benefits and programs that you offer. And lastly, I would love to see innovative programs, like I mentioned before, that bring people with Parkinson's disease together and encourage fitness and wellness instead of focusing so much on medication and, get an appointment here or consult here. Exercise is much less expensive than sending somebody to a physical therapy appointment. There's so many things that we can do that don't cost a lot of money. For example, this morning before my talk, I was in the gym. Fortunately, I got up super early. There was no one there, and I was singing as loudly as I could on the treadmill to get my voice ready for today. Things like practicing making funny faces in the mirror. There's so many things we do to manage our symptoms that I've learned along the way from other people with Parkinson's. And just by bringing us together, we figure out these little tricks. And, one grandmother told me that every time she sees her granddaughter, they have a funny face contest, and it helps with her facial masking. So you don't learn that from your physician. You learn that from bringing other people together. A couple pictures of parachute training and then from Afghanistan. And lastly, I've started a website to help educate and inspire other people with Parkinson's. And a lot of the same topics that we talked about in the previous talk are on this. I recently wrote a post about how to talk to your doctor and make the most of your doctor's appointments, because I feel like I'm doing as well as I am because I have been able to communicate with my doctors effectively and use the most of that time. I've also had tools for managing various symptoms that I've learned along the way. My story, the story of other people who've done amazing things, and I hope to help reduce the stigma of Parkinson's disease, and that, yes, I have Parkinson's disease. Yes, I shake a lot sometimes. Yes, my face looks funny sometimes, but helping people to just own that and just get on with your life. So try to ignore the negative and focus on what we can do. So thank you so much.
I can't recall the last time I was brought to tears by a Patrick talk. Continuing the theme to a certain extent, oops, sorry. Yeah, enough with that. The final speaker for this session is Dr. Monty Grossman from the Philadelphia VA. He's